All right, let's dive right in. We're looking at a critical situation brewing in Bangladesh, where the country's entire fuel supply is, frankly, hanging by a thread. This is a story about how a war thousands of miles away is colliding with a local economic crisis, and it's pushing a vital oil refinery right to the edge. This number you're seeing? 7. Right now, this might be the single most important number for Bangladesh's entire energy sector. It's not just a number, it's a countdown, a deadline that could trigger huge problems for the whole country.
That's right, just 7 days. That's the window before the Eastern Refinery, the country's one and only facility for processing crude oil, could be forced to shut down completely. And the reason is terrifyingly simple. They are basically out of crude oil.
To put it bluntly, officials are saying the plant is running on its death stock. That's the absolute bare minimum of oil sloshing around at the bottom of the tanks. Essentially, the very heart of the country's fuel production is on life support.
So you have to be asking, how did things get this bad this fast? Well, the immediate trigger wasn't actually a domestic problem. It was a conflict that blew up thousands of miles away in the Persian Gulf. Let's walk through how this all went down. So it all kicks off on February 28th when conflict turns the Persian Gulf into a no-go zone. Just a few days later, a tanker that was on its way to Bangladesh, the Nordic Pollux, had to turn around because the Strait of Hormuz was just too dangerous. And even though a ceasefire was called on April 8th, shipping companies are still calling the route a death trap. The supply line has been completely cut. Okay, so the oil supply is cut off. What does that actually mean for the country? Let's talk about the real-world cascading effects if this one refinery really does go dark. Now, when you look at this, you see that most of the country's fuel, especially diesel, is imported directly. The Eastern Refinery only handles about 24% of the total supply. You might think, okay, that's a problem, but maybe not a catastrophe. But hold on, it's not about the quantity, it's about the type of fuel it produces. And this is where it starts to hit home for a lot of people. The refinery is the main domestic source for petrol and octane, the stuff that fuels pretty much all the cars and motorcycles on the road. So while things like shipping and industry that run on diesel might be okay for now, everyday transportation is facing a potential shutdown. So the logical question here is, all right, if they get more crude oil in a few weeks, why not just turn the plant off and then flip a switch to turn it back on later? Seems simple enough, right? Well, unfortunately, it's not that easy. Not even close. You see, this is a massive old refinery. It's not like a generator you can just fire up. It's designed to run continuously. If it shuts down completely and goes cold, the oil left inside all those pipes can literally solidify, hardening like concrete. This can cause catastrophic damage to the machinery. A shutdown that lasts even a week could mean months of repairs just to get the thing running again. But here's where the story takes a fascinating and troubling turn. That conflict in the Persian Gulf, that was just the trigger. What it really did was expose a much deeper, much more dangerous problem that was already lurking within Bangladesh's economy. You see, the real reason Bangladesh can't just pivot and say, okay, let's buy our crude oil from Malaysia or somewhere else, comes down to something that's been talked about for a while now, a crippling shortage of US dollars. This dollar crisis has completely tied their hands. While they're trying to make new deals, bureaucracy is slowing everything down. And maybe more importantly, international suppliers are getting nervous. They don't have a lot of confidence that the country's banks can pay the security deposits on time. So the nation is essentially handcuffed, unable to buy its way out of the crisis.
So with crude oil basically off the table for now, the government is being forced into a desperate plan B. But the problem is this supposed solution might just be trading one disaster for an even bigger one.
So here's the choice they're facing. Normally, they import cheap crude oil and refine it themselves. This saves a ton of valuable foreign currency. The emergency fix? Import refined fuel, like petrol and octane, directly. But this is way, way more expensive, and it would burn through their already scarce US dollar reserves at an alarming rate. In fact, one analyst called this exact strategy a potential death trap for the economy. Think about it. To solve the immediate fuel shortage, they have to spend their limited dollars, but that only makes the dollar crisis worse, which is the very thing preventing them from buying crude oil in the first place. It's an absolutely vicious cycle. And why should you care about all this high-level economic drama? Because the consequences are going to be felt in everyday life. We're talking about a possible return to major power cuts, widespread load shedding. It could easily spark transport strikes as fuel runs low. And you can bet that any extra costs are eventually going to be passed down to you right at the pump.
And all of this leads us to the final, really unsettling question. You've got a refinery on life support, a critical supply line cut off by war, and an economy that's so drained of cash it can't find another way out. The path forward here is anything but clear. The real question isn't just about fuel anymore. It's about the stability of the entire system. Where does a crisis like this even end?